Hey everyone, it's Sen Types, and today I'm going to be ranking all the A-Spec cards, but not on how good they are, but on how well designed I think that they are. And this is something that I think is pretty interesting to think about, and something that a lot of people don't talk about from what I hear. And that's because, how much doesn't matter because, they're already printed. It's not like they're going to be changed later on, most likely. So, or banned or like buffed or something weird like that. So, it doesn't matter how well they're designed because they're here, but I think it does. I think it's an interesting thing to take a look at. So I'm going to take a look at them. And so what do I mean by this? First of all, balance. Balance is something that's important to the game, especially with A-Specs, because A-Spec cards, and I'll pull up one of them here, although it's pretty hard to read it. It says it on the right here of the card. You can only play one A-Spec card in your deck. You can't play more than one. This means that if one's much better than the rest, then you have almost no reason to ever play the other ones because now, like, you're actively handicapping yourself if you're just playing a bad one instead of a good one. It's not like, oh, you have this other card that is like a more niche card that is kind of interesting, but then you still have the good card. No, you lose out on the good card as well. So that is a bit of an issue and why balancing A-Specs is so important. And also with Radiant Pokemon, I've talked about those in the past some, and Radiant Pokemon, they're not balanced. Radiant Greninja is really good. It's like by far the best. And Radiant Charizard and Radiant Alakazam and maybe a few others are pretty solid. Radiant Charizard's pretty solid. It's pretty good as well. But there are a bunch that just aren't very good. So, but I do think um, the A-Spec cards are more balanced. Also, they are in 3 different types, though there will be a stadium coming later, but there are a few tool cards, there are a few special energy cards, and then there's a bunch of items. So let's start off with Master Ball. It just lets you search for any Pokemon, and it is an item, and it's all right. I mean, it's pretty boring, and this is not the first time we've seen Master Ball or the A-Spec mechanic, so I feel like they could have like improved it. Honestly, Master Ball isn't that good. It's pretty underwhelming. The A-Specs now are well, there's Computer Search, which is like super good, and then there was also Dowsing Machine, which was also super good. Arguably a bit more powerful. Dowsing Machine, like for allowing you to do stuff that you couldn't otherwise, but Computer Search was just a bailout of certain scenarios, especially in expanded format. But anyways, Master Ball, pretty all right in terms of balance and design. I mean, it's weaker, but it's not like unplayably bad. If I look at tournament results, which by the way, there aren't as many tournament results for the newer ones, but older cards we see here, it's almost all Lugia V Star. A few things to say about this. One, Lugia V Star probably isn't playing this A-Spec anymore. So if I go look at the tournament, the North American International Championship, we can look at the cards within the Lugia deck. It was actually the second most played deck on whatever D2 or whatever this is. In terms of A-Specs, they literally all played Legacy Energy. So, yeah, they're not going to be running Master Ball. There is value in Secret Box, but also we'll talk about Legacy Energy. It's like so good in Lugia. But Master Ball, I'm going to put it in B tier. I don't think it's badly designed. It's certainly not super well designed. It's not super interesting, but it's fine. And it being like weaker than the others isn't too bad as kind of the introductory A-Spec. And it's not like you're handicapping yourself putting it in because it does boost your consistency some. And if you're playing cards like Lumineon V or Squawkabilly EX or various different engine cards, it can just be really powerful in certain scenarios and kind of bail you out. It is searchable off of Arven, so it can be nice in stage 2 decks, and there are some use cases of it. It's not a terrible card. I could see it in C tier, but it is like a classic, so that's fine. Then let's talk about the other like regular item from the set, which is Prime Catcher. This is also I will say some of the item A specs, I think just these two are exactly the same as certain supporter cards. The two of the item specs in standard. Computer search is also the same as a supporter, but that's something to note in terms of how well like they should be balanced, I guess. But Prime Catcher is the same as the supporter card Guzma. Switching one of your opponent's bench to the active, and if you do, you get to switch as well. I think this is okay in terms of its design. In terms of its utility, it's really good. It's the best one, I think. If we just like scroll through the cards, the decks that play it, it's a lot, and it's not that old of a card. It's pretty new as well. So It's really good. It's kind of overpowered, which is a bit of an issue. As I said, if there's one really good one, it'll kind of push the other ones out of the format, which is kind of what's happening. We're seeing stuff like Unfair Stamp, Secret Box, Legacy Energy, and Scoop Up Cyclone. I don't know if Scoop Up Cyclone's in the same tier as those other ones, but Secret Box has great utility, which we'll talk about. And same thing with Unfair Stamp. And Legacy Energy has utility, but a really high upside as well. And they're getting kind of pushed out of the format because of Prime Catcher. Specifically, Unfair Stamp, I would say, is been the one that's been pushed out. I think a lot more than people have expected. I think a lot of people are expecting Unfair Stamp to be like super, super good and like the best A-Spec, and it has not been that. It's been Prime Catcher. So that's an issue, but it's not like super broken, overpowered, and it does kind of change certain dynamics of the game in an interesting way. It means that people are playing more Switch, which means the control is worse. And also, gusting is important in control, but they already have counter catcher. So this is interesting as well. There normally isn't a lot of item gust. I don't know if that's always true, but for a while there wasn't a lot of item gust. But then there's counter catcher, which was printed pretty recently. And so counter catcher allows you to gust with an item if you're down on prizes. So that means that there are times when counter catchers essentially just as good as prime catcher. So that's pretty interesting. I think it has a lot of interesting dynamics that make it like a fine card. Kind of interesting. It is searchable as well, but obviously if you're searching for it, then you're not searching for some other cards. So if you're looking at like Irida or Arvin, which are specifically Arvin, the ones that I used to search it, it's not like super good because usually those are like setup based cards. But it's solid. I'll put it in B tier as well, and I'm not ranking the tiers, so yeah, maybe I will if there's some reason to, but I think they're pretty similar in how good they are in terms of design. Let's talk about the other two items now from that set. We have Reboot Pod and an Awakening Drum. Awakening Drum is an ancient card, and it says draw a card for each of your ancient Pokemon in play. So I really have two things to say about this card. Two main things to say about it being an ancient card. The one is it doesn't really it obviously you need a lot of ancient Pokemon, and decks just don't play a lot of ancient Pokemon. There's this deck called Ancient Box that plays all ancient Pokemon, but aside from that, like no other decks can play it, so it's limited in what it can be played in. On top of that, it has some synergy with ancient cards. Specifically, in the ancient box, we see Roaring Moon, which does 70 and 10 more for each ancient card in your discard, so it does do more damage playing Awakening Drum. And doing 10 extra damage essentially all game it's good. So that's kind of interesting there. But in terms of how good it actually is draw a card feature ancient Pokemon in play. So let's say you have 3, which is not crazy. Draw 3, that's a supporter. There are lots of supporters that do it, so that's pretty like all right value, but it's not always draw 3. It's kind of weird. If you have a bad board state, then it's drawing you less cards. And if you have a good board state, it's drawing you more cards. In some sense, that's very logical. But in terms of like being balanced, it's not really that. It's not like a comeback mechanic. And it means, more importantly, that if you get unlucky, then it's just kind of dead in your hand. But if you get lucky, it's really good. So it kind of makes the game even swingier, which isn't really so good. It's also not that good. Draw 3 as like a supporter isn't that good. Especially compared to Secret Box, which we'll talk about. Like drawing 3 random cards probably isn't going to help you that much. And then Unfair Stamp also that just draws you more cards usually. It's a little different as well. And then Master Ball Search is a very specific card in Hyper Aroma as well for certain Pokemon if you need those. But I think Awakening Drum is pretty badly designed because it's just not very good and it's so niche. It's not like terrible in terms of its power level within the deck, the like essentially singular deck that it's good in. But even like let's take a look at the tournament that just happened, the IRL tournament that just happened, and looking at the decks, you see that we have Raging Bolt. Raging Bolt does not play this. I clicked the wrong deck. But Raging Bolt doesn't play this because it runs Raging Bolt EX, which is an ancient Pokemon, but it doesn't really run that many other ancient Pokemon. And Ancient Box does often play this, I guess, or sometimes play this. Actually, I wanna check if Ancient Box is playing this because I don't know if it is or not. But Ancient Box is playing, no, three of them played Secret Box, and then one played Prime Catcher, and one played Awakening Drum. So we see like the more general A specs being comparable in terms of power level, kind of, but then this is more like specialized. So it just doesn't see a lot of play, and it's kind of boring. It's just not that interesting. Like drawing cards anyway, it's not that cool to draw cards. It's not like it's doing something new and unique. On the other hand, we have Reboot Pod. This is the future one. This is attached in basic energy card from Magiska Pal to each of your future Pokemon. However, we have a bit of an issue with this card. It's not that good either. So the big issue is that it only accelerates energy to future Pokemon, which means you need to be running a lot of future Pokemon, but then it's all to the different Pokemon. So you're not accelerating 2 energy to any one Pokemon. This means that you're literally like it's about as good as just accelerating 1 energy, at least on that turn, unless you're moving the energy around, which you can do, but that's kind of hard to do. So yeah, that's not so good. I'll put it in the same tier as Awakening Jump. I think it's has higher upside and higher downside. It's not a consistency boost, but like it's not very interesting, and it's like a little interesting, but it's so hard to pull off because you need, if you have like 5 future Pokemon in play, which is kind of what you're looking to do and kind of the point of this card, you need 5 energy in the discard, and they need to be of the right types because you're probably running a toolbox style deck. That's kind of the point of it. We have a lot of different attackers, and now you're just like, I mean, that it just doesn't work. So yeah, it's not so good. C is like not good. B is like whatever. A is good, and S is really good design, and then D is like pretty bad. I don't know if anything will be in D. Certainly F, I could have had that. That would be like complete trash, but yeah, I don't think anything is in that tier. Then we have 2 tool cards, and we have 3 tool cards, but 2 tool cards from the first set. We have Hero's Cape, which says 100 extra HP to the cards attached to as a tool. And Maximum Bell, your attacks do 50 more damage to your opponent's active EX. I actually think Maximum Bell isn't super well designed because for the one reason that it doesn't do 50 more to all rule box Pokemon. That would have made it better. Wouldn't have made it much better. It would have made it better. By a noticeable amount, but I feel like it wouldn't be like broken then, and I just wish they used the term rule box almost all the time instead of Pokemon EX and V, or just EX in this case, because it means that's better, like long term and expanded and stuff. But that's not that big of an issue. I'm not a big fan of that, and well, it does make it noticeably better now with a lot of Pokemon V's in format, like a year or 2 or whatever from now, before this rotates. It's is it 3 years? I think it's like 2 years from now. Then it's like it won't matter if it says rule box or just EXs, or maybe it will. Maybe we're gonna see some new mechanic that's it's not like EXs, but it's like, I don't know. Pokemon's gonna come up with like another mechanic that's like lowercase e capital X or something. That's some different mechanic, but yeah, so they're going to come up with some new mechanic at some point, and then it's not going to do more damage to them, which is not so good. But whatever, that's not a huge deal. In terms of the actual damage, 50 extra is fine. It helps hit certain numbers. And right now, damage manipulation just, well, I was going to say it's not really relevant, or just isn't really a thing, but Monkey Dory is a card, and that card is doing pretty well right now, specifically in Gardevoir, but in other decks as well. And that is damage manipulation. So I think that's cool. I think you need multiple ways of damage manipulation. We also have Kieran. We have some other cards, I think, but we have other tools as well. So you can't play Maximum Belt and then also Choice Belt on the same Pokemon. But that's something to keep in mind. I think it's an all right design. We'll put it in B tier. It's not bad in terms of balance. I mean, it's so different than the other ones that they're not really comparable, which is good, because if you're just comparing them, then one's just going to be like directly better than the others, which is just not what you want. Then Hero's Cape, the Pokemon this card is attached gets 100 extra HP. I want to say I'm a big fan of this, but then let's look at the decks, and it's in Control, it's in Gardevoir some, but not that much. I guess it's in Gardevoir a decent amount, and then it's also in Charizard, and it's in a few other decks. I think the fact that it's in like Control, specifically the Snorlax-based Control deck, makes it like really boring, or much less like the deck's really boring, so it doesn't make the card seem any better. But I don't know, that's not really the card's fault. And then it can get lost vacuumed, and lost vacuum's kind of annoying. That's true of Survival Brace. We'll talk about Survival Brace later, and then also Maximum Belt. But the difference is that your opponent can play lost vacuum. They can only play it on their turn. and Hero's Cape only matters on their turn. So they'll be able to Lost Vacuum it before, but they can't Lost Vacuum Maximum Belt before you get the benefit of that. So that's a pretty big downside to me. I actually think it's a pretty solid card outside of that. I think it's a kind of interesting card, and it's a pretty simple one as well. Just looking at the length of text, it might be really hard to see, but it's the shortest, I think, of all the A specs, which is good. That means it's simple, and it's pretty logical. It's like, oh yeah, I just get a lot more HP, pretty cool, and I can maybe tank another hit, and I can win the game because of that. Or you could loop it, and looping it becomes a bit of a problem, and I think that's partially why it's lower because of looping it with Penny and like Snorlax decks and stuff like that. So that's a bit of an annoyance, but overall, I think it's a pretty solid card. It's a card I do like, but it just has a few flaws. And then the last card, the last old card, is going to be Neo Upper Energy. This one on the original tier list I had ranked last as like the worst A spec by a wide margin, but it's not in that spot anymore because of Dragapult EX. So it says it provides one colorless. It's a special energy, the first one ever, A spec, I believe. So first special energy A spec, not first A spec. So it provides one colorless if it's attached to just some random Pokemon, which is it's not great, obviously, but you can use it to retreat, and it actually can be attached. And then if this card's attached to a stage 2, it provides 2 energy of every type, which is kind of weird, the way that energies like typings work. So if you had a Pokemon that had an attack that was like, so there's an Okidogi. It doesn't work on it because it's a basic, but let's say it did. Okidogi is fighting its attack cost, but then it has a buff. If it has a Darkness energy attached. So this would work if Okidogi was a stage 2 because it provides every energy but 2 energy at a time. It's kind of weird. Not a big issue, but it's just a little weird. So the big issue with this is it's just not very good. 2 energies is okay. I mean, certainly cards like double colorless energy, double turbo energy, double dragon energy, um, and like any energy that's multiple types is good, but you're like sacrificing consistency because or some like other just like consistency essentially. Because Prime Catcher is kind of consistency. It's like, oh, I don't play Boss's Orders. I play Professor's Research this turn, and then I also play Prime Catcher. So, Neo Upper Energy is like, it's not that, right? And it's so niche in its use cases as well, because if you just need 2 energies, like, you could use double Turbo Energy on Meowscarada EX or something. So, and Charizard EX doesn't need it. Dragapult EX really likes this card, but it's just so niche that it's not that good. You want a Pokemon that's multiple energies of really different types. So, it's really niche in its use cases. So I'm gonna put it in C tier. It's like moderately interesting, I guess, but like if we look at the decks it's played in, one of them is an expanded deck, or 2 of them, which is actually a really cool deck. I did a video covering this deck. It's pretty neat. It runs Firefighter Pikachu as well. But yeah, it's not like the best card. Like even if in this deck it's not that good. Also, there is Reversal Energy. Reversal Energy is kind of similar. They're certainly different, but they're related. And there are times when Reversal Energy is just better than Neo Upper Energy. So being outclassed by like a regular card isn't good. Yeah. Then we come to the other special energy card, Legacy Energy. This is kind of interesting. It's actually it's much more interesting. So it's energy of every type attached to all Pokemon. So this is already better than a regular special energy. Even ones that were really good, like Rainbow Energy, Aurora Energy, or Prism Energy is kind of similar. But Luminous Energy is an energy of every type, but only if it's the only special energy. So this means it can be played in Lugia V-Star decks, which is really powerful. However, it can be played in other decks. One thing I do like it in Pidgeot Control. What is this list? I just clicked on a random list. So yeah, it's pretty interesting in the deck. I think it's kind of cool, but it has use cases in other decks other than Lugia, and I hope it will see that. I mean, we can see it here in Iron Thorns. Iron Thorns DX is like super boring. It literally only plays 1 Pokemon, but yeah, Legacy Energy is a pretty cool card that provides energy of every type. But that's not the only thing it does. It says if it was knocked out by damage from an opponent's attack, that player takes 1 less prize card. However, the effect of Legacy Energy can't be applied more than once per game. I think that's an issue. I've said this when this card was revealed because if this card gets recovered, then it'll still get the energy of every type, but then it won't do the extra prize, or it won't like it will give up the regular amount of prizes, not 1 less. But And that's not an issue for game design reason in terms of just how good it is in terms of balance, and that might be better, but it requires like a separate way of like tracking it. That being said, there's no way to track if you played a supporter or attached an energy. I know some people use like counters, but that's not that hard to track. So it shouldn't be that hard to track this card, but it's still an issue that just seems kind of weird. Um, so yeah, that's the thing. But then the there isn't really that much of an issue out of it outside of it. Right now, it's only played in Lugia mostly, so I do think it will be played in more decks though as time goes on because it's really good in every deck. Not necessarily the best ace spec, but it has value because it gives up one less prize. So instead of tanking a hit in terms of like surviving it, you're still getting knocked out, but then you are giving up one less prize. You can kind of it provides a similar thing to Hero Escape or Survival Brace. But then it's also an energy of every type, which we just don't have in Standard, which is pretty crazy. No Luminous or sorry, no Aurora or Rainbow energies or even Prism energy. There's a Luminous energy though, which is as I said, it doesn't work with extra special energies attached, so you can't use like a true toolbox with it. If we look up Luminous energy, then you can see some kind of interesting things. Oh, it was a secret rare in the set. I didn't know that. Also, sorry, my like voice is tired. I don't know why my voice is so tired right now, but it's sounding kind of funny. So, Luminous Energy is played sometimes in Lugia Archeops, but then like you can't use Lugia Archeops to power up, say, Luminion V, because Luminion V, then you need some extra colorless energies, which are special energies, but then turn off the Luminous Energy. So it's used for Radiant Charizard. And it can be used in other decks. We see Reggie's. Reggie's is pretty bad, but it is really good here. But then you have all these basic energies as well. Um, but yeah, so Legacy Energy is really good. It has that like weird like thing, the caveat of the you can only use it once per game, which I think makes it worse in terms of having to track that. But still, I think it's a really well designed card. Then we have another tool, Survival Brace. If the Pokemon this card is attached to has full HP and will be knocked out by damage from an attack of your opponent's Pokemon, it is knocked out. Or sorry, not knocked out when its remaining HP becomes 10, then discard this card. That's a lot of text. It's not the longest text, it's less text than Legacy Energy, and that didn't make that card bad. It made it a little weird, but it's not like it has a lot of depth. It's a really boring card, in my opinion, and it's not that good. Um, and so there's not that much reason to play it over Hero's Cape. Certainly, yes, Hero's Cape won't always let you survive a hit, but versus Survival Brace essentially always will. Um, but it's not really interesting. It's more complicated, and I don't think there's a reason for both of these to exist. I think Hero's Cape's way more interesting than Survival Cape, or at least as interesting. And it's better, and it's simpler, and it's just, in my opinion, more fun because you still can one-shot stuff. And when you one-shot a Pokemon with Hero's Cape, you feel like so powerful, and it feels so fun. That doesn't really happen with Survival Cast. There are ways to get around it, but they don't feel fun. It's like, oh, I Roaring Moon EX'd my opponent. Whoa, but you do that every game, so like it's not that interesting. I think Survival Cast is pretty bad. It's not like complete trash. I don't think I need to create an F tier, but it's not very good. And then we have 3 items. No, we have 4 items. So we have secret. I just closed one. So we have secret box, which I've been talking about in a bunch, and this is kind of interesting. You can only use this if you discard 3 other cards from your hand. You search your deck for an item, a tool, a supporter, and a stadium reveal and put them into your hand. Shuffle your deck. This is pretty interesting. Obviously, gets you a lot of different cards, and that's pretty cool. And it can be used in a lot of different decks. However, it's kind of weird because it warps your deck to do some weird things because I mean you don't want to play this if you don't play a tool, if you don't play any items, tools, supporters, or stadiums, or if you don't play, if you're missing one of those, it just feels bad. And then it also has the issue of I mean, you really want at least 2 of all those, but you really want like 3 of all of them, right? You want to be able to always get value out of all 4. But then if you've already played a supporter, you don't get any value out of getting the supporter. And then you don't want to play a wide variety of supporters because what if you don't hit this card, right? So, but you want to play a bit of a variety of supporters because like what's the value if you just play one supporter? I mean, it's pretty boring. So, it's a really weird and complicated card and kind of warps your deck building, but also isn't that good. Like it's solid, but it's not like computer search just bails you out of any scenario essentially, especially in expanded format. But Secret Box isn't computer search, so there are times when it's just kind of weird. There are times when you don't need all this stuff, and there are times when you need like say 2 items or something. So That's a bit of an issue. That being said, I think it's fine. I do think it is a pretty well designed A-spec, but it's not. It obviously has like issues, like I was saying, that make it not as good. And then it kind of warps your deck in a weird way. And then I guess I should talk about Arvin here. Arvin can search for this, but it's a supporter, so then you don't get the value out of the supporter. And then you already search for a tool with Arvin, so you don't really get value out of the tool. And Arvin's like super common right now, so it makes this card feel way worse. In terms of balance, I think it's pretty good, and I think there's a time when it might become great. We'll see. Artizone is a really solid stadium, and you can use that with Secret Box. But in terms of like the decks that play it, we see Ancient Box, and then we see this Raging Bolt deck. Raging Bolt likes it. Raging Bolt needs turbo stuff as well, and Secret Box is really solid for that deck. But yeah, I think B tier is fine. And then we have Scoop Up Cyclone, and Scoop Up Cyclone is a pretty interesting uh, um, A-spec. It's a reprint, right? It's one of the reprints. If we look at the decks it's in Reggie Draco expanded decks and a bunch of expand decks and a bunch of like old standard. Wait, is this a standard deck? I don't know. But some of these are standard decks, and so it was an older standard decks, and this wasn't standard, was it? It saw some playing standard, but it's a pretty cool card because what it does is it just says put one of your Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your hand. And so we do actually have the support of Professor Tour's scenario. Technically, this isn't directly better because Professor Tour's scenario is well, okay, there are technically reasons to have supporters over items as well, but it's not technically better because Professor Terra's scenario is a future card, but I mean that like never comes into play. I don't think I've ever seen it happen where it matters. That's a future card. So pretty much this is a directly better version of that supporter, which is already a solid supporter. So this is a really interesting card. It has a lot of depth. Because it can be used for a few different things. One, it can be used as just a switch, which has value. Switching is obviously important in some decks and like crucial in some decks, crucial in certain matchups, but kind of not as important in other matchups. So there are times when you play a switch card, but then you just don't do anything with it. Of course, Prime Catcher also is a switch, so that's a little weird, and you have these two cards that both are switches. But then this card can also, and by the way, you will use this as a switch if you play it. Then it also has the value of being a healing card. You pick up the Pokemon, but you remove all the damage off of it, which is really powerful, especially against certain decks where opponents trying to target Pokemon over multiple turns, and then retreating it doesn't get out of harm's way if they have consistent gusting or spread options. So it has value there. And then it also has the value of being able to reuse abilities. So you're looking at something like Lumineon V. It has an ability that you get on play, and then you can play Scoop Up Cyclone to be able to reuse that ability. And now that is really solid. Of course, it's only once per game, so it's not something you can consistently rely on to do all of those things, but it is something you can rely on to do something in every game, generally, which is really nice. Kind of like Prime Catcher. Just more nuanced is how I describe it. It's not better. It's worse than Prime Catcher, which is a bit disappointing. Like it's worse a lot of the time, but it has times when it really shines as well. I played the Greninja EX control deck for a video. The video ends when Pokemon DC Live works video, and I played Scoop Up Cyclone, and it was so much fun. It's probably the most fun A-spec. It is a reprint, but it's a really good reprint. And so I'm going to end up putting it in an A tier, I think. I think it's a really solid design. It held up. Master Ball, it's whatever. It's really boring. Swoop Up Cyclone's pretty straightforward as well, but it has a lot of nuance and has a lot of different use cases and pros and cons. And so that's really cool because like you scoop it up. So when you heal it, you unevolve it essentially, and you lose all the stuff. It doesn't get discarded, but it's not in play anymore either. But yeah, then we have Hyper Aroma. Hyper Aroma is not very good. I'm just gonna say that, but it's not terrible. It's like good in Gardevoir, and Gardevoir is a pretty good deck. But I mean, it's probably the best deck. But Hyper Aroma, stretch your deck for up to 3 stage ones, reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. That being said, like stage ones aren't that good. Gardevoir is a stage 2 deck. It's not a stage 1 deck. So yeah, you run lots of Kirlias, but it's insanely good ace spec, so just happens to work pretty well in a deck with like what you want 4 Curlias or 3 Curlias in play. So it's good in certain cases, but it's not that good because turn 1 it's terrible. You're not going to play any of the stage ones, and like later on it's pretty terrible because you already have all your stage ones in play. So it's really only good turn two. So I think it's pretty badly designed. I think it's C tier. I mean, it's like more broad in general. It's not like it's completely outclassed by something. I do think Master Ball is better generally for most decks, but in Master Ball isn't even that good. But Hyper is just not that good, but it's not terrible. There are times when you might want it. Looking at Frostlass, it's kind of cool, and it's when it like is good, it's really fun as well. So it's not like some super boring card because Survival Cast just like sitting there taking a hit. Having 10 HP remaining isn't like a great feeling. But Hyperoma, I think it's all right. It's not like that bad. Um, it's not as bad as Survival Cast in terms of design. It's not terrible, but it's below average. And there's not too much to say about it beyond that. Lastly, though, Unfair Stamp. And Unfair Stamp is an item, of course, again. And this one says you can only use this if one of your Pokemon was, or any of your Pokemon were knocked out during your opponent's last turn. Each player shuffles their hand into their deck, and then you draw 5 cards. Your opponent draws 2. That's pretty interesting. Comeback mechanics I think are cool. I mentioned how Awakening Drum is like a reverse comeback mechanic. It's like a ramping mechanic. You keep going up. Or you stay down. You don't build too much. So Unfair Stamp isn't a comeback mechanic, except you can use it even if you're not down on prizes or like really early in the game. It's kind of like Iono or Roxanne, but it's more aggressive. But then both of those, this card's so good. It's kind of like what Ace Trainer, I think. I'm not super familiar with this card. Oh no, this is only if you're down prizes. So yeah, it's not like that. It's similar, but not the same. Unfair Stamp though is like super good. I think it's a little broken in certain scenarios, and then it's just like it's all right in other scenarios though. I think it's pretty general, so I'll put it in B tier. It's kind of like Prime Catcher, probably a little overtuned, a little worse than Prime Catcher. I think they're pretty similar power levels. But yeah, obviously, putting your opponent down to 2 cards, that's not a lot of cards. And drawing 5 is pretty good. Getting getting them down to 2 does mean that they can draw out of it though. So sometimes you unfair your stamp your opponent. They need like a certain card or a certain combo of cards, and they get it, and that feels so bad. It feels like you're unlucky, and you kind of are. Or then they don't, and then they like completely brick, and then it feels like they're unlucky, and they kind of are. So it's a card that has a lot of luck, it feels to it, which isn't good. But in terms of like it's powerful and it can swing games, but that's interesting. Effects that can swing games because if it's just like, oh, you're set up, okay, you keep winning. Like Prime Catcher can be used in super interesting scenarios, but it can be boring a lot of the time as well. So Unfair Stamp is really like big whenever you play it. It's like a big deal usually, so that's kind of cool. I don't think it's like a super broken aspec, but it is one that I am looking forward to seeing more of in the future. I think it could be a little broken, but it's kind of cool. But anyways, here's my ranking of the designs of the A-Specs. But I'm interested in hearing your thoughts down below. If you think the new A-Specs are better or worse than the old A-Specs. But I hope you enjoyed. Consider liking and subscribing. And as always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.